So after a bunch of trial and error, this is what the wheel gap looks like now. And that's about as low as I can get it without the collars almost basically touching. I've got about 5 threads between the adjusting collar, the adjustment collar, and the 2 collars that hold the preload on the springs. Also, you can't really tell it this close, but I've got the fender gap about even. So the front is basically about 2 fingers, and the back is about 1, which the suspension is pretty stiff, so I'm not too concerned about it rubbing in the back. But the front, since the total diameter is so much shorter than the back, I'm guessing that's why it is the way it is. So like I said before, this is 23.5 total, and the back is 25.5 total circumference, rim and tire mounted and balanced. So let's go to the other side, and this is the last 19-inch wheel on the front of the car, and the rear bumper that is going to be fixed, or I'm going to drop the car off either today or tomorrow for the body shop to basically replace it. This is an old shitty fiberglass bumper, probably from the early 90s or early 2000s, when all that stuff was real popular to start using fiberglass. But now there's a company that makes them out of FRP, which is more, more rubber, plasticky feeling, but it's flexible and it doesn't crack when you hit stuff with it. And the reason I'm switching over, not only for preference, but because when I did have a tire blowout, it took out that part of the bumper and it broke that whole thing off. The body shop that I talked to said that they wouldn't repair the bumper because usually when you have mounting surface or mounting area damage, which these parts broke off, this bolt is what's left over from what was holding the fender, and this one broke off, and then the one that was here broke off. So they said they won't repair anything that's close to a mounting surface or how it was mounted to the vehicle. In their experience, it's just going to be brittle no matter what you do. So I took this opportunity to find an FRP bumper that's actually not too expensive at all, and I won't have this issue in the future because the bumper will flex. I might have to worry about paint chipping, but I won't have to worry about the bumper actually breaking. And the back will be fine. So let's go get this wheel. I'm gonna have to stop the video though so I can turn the car around. But this is a comparison between the Volk wheel, 19-inch wheel with a 255/30 tire on it versus a 15-inch wheel with a 205/50. And I did that mainly for the height. I did not want to run with the same really low aspect ratio tires again and risk a blowout that would damage the rim and not just take out the tire. So we're going to roll this thing out there. Oh, and these wheels are 15 by 7. The 19s that I'm taking off are 19 by 9.5. So not only do I have issues with having to run spacers for the inside of the suspension not to hit, because with my Volks, as you can see, there's plenty of room, but on the inside the wheel would actually rub on the suspension. So I'll be using a small spacer because the reinforcement on the caliper bracket actually hits the spokes, and as you can see, this wheel is still painted, but it hasn't been scratched up because I didn't try to mount it yet. So let's see what the next video or next section looks like. Alright, so this is the suspension I was talking about by a company called Nex. And yes, my sway bar, I had a nut on there, but as you can see, because of all the vibration and it probably wasn't a very good nut on there, the nut came off, so the sway bar isn't actually attached right now. I'll fix that at a later time once I really start driving the car more. Right now it just needs to make it 10 or 15 minutes down the road to get fixed. Now this suspension, there is this collar that rotates and there's these two. Now this collar, once I loosen it, allows this entire shock body to slide up and down inside this housing, separate from the spring tension. So what I have to do to adjust the height on this one is to loosen this nut and then turn this entire assembly all together to raise and lower it. And as you can see, the bottom of the shock is actually right there. So I'll be lowering this part down more in there so it doesn't affect the preload on the springs. Okay, so something I wasn't paying attention to. Now my street has a slant to the right. So even though I'm standing here, the car looks like it's leaning to the right. Although it is, it's more exaggerated because the road kind of curves down right here. But there is something that needs to be looked at. So the finger gap I was talking about on the left side as we're looking at the car was less than a finger, and the right side was 2 fingers. But if you look at the distance between, I'll use this little thing on my keychain, distance between this side and the ground versus this side and the ground is completely different. So obviously once I put the other wheel on there and adjust it all the way, this thing's going to be riding a whole lot lower than it was before. Now it still won't be dragging the ground or anything, but this gap, or lack of a gap, is actually exaggerated because the other side of the car is leaning down more. I also noticed while I was moving the car that it did rub while I was just turning it around just now. So that's me get this thing adjusted all the way down, and I think I'm going to have somewhat of a old school, I guess, roadster type stance on this, which really was not intended. I wanted it to be, I guess, a little bit less than even, like a little bit lower in the front than in the back, just because the tires are so much bigger, but this is going to look a little different. Also, if anybody can leave a comment for me. Now this wheel, no matter how much I tighten the 2 nuts on the suspension, it cambers in with just normal driving. Now that's the passenger side. The driver's side, as you can tell, whatever setting I put it on, which is, basically eyeball straight up and down, it stays there. So I don't know if it's just a suspension issue or if I'm going to tighten the bolt down hard enough, which I'm kind of worried about breaking the bolt because I do pull pretty hard on it. I got a long breaker bar. But from the inside of the car, I can actually see this tire outside the body, or if I look at the mirror. Now with this one, with the camber, obviously it may look a little more exaggerated. I can't see the top of the tire. So we'll see, but the front is actually poking out a lot more than I ever cared about, but I needed to run a spacer to clear the suspension, and 20 millimeters was as low or as close as I could get it. Alright, let's see what I can get after the wheel gets replaced.